What if an eagle wasn't just a bird, but a messenger of the spirits? What if its flight wasn't just a movement in the sky, but a call to something far greater? In the darkness of the forest, a boy rejected by his own tribe stumbles upon a destiny no one could have foreseen. Guided by the piercing gaze of a golden eagle, he faces the fury of nature, defies death, and discovers that his connection to the wilderness runs deeper than anyone ever imagined. But what really happens when a simple boy becomes part of a legend? And what did the eagle see in him that no one else could? This is a story of courage, mystery, and redemption, one that the forest will never forget. The wind whispered through the tall pines, carrying the scent of damp earth and dried leaves. The full moon bathed the valley in silver light, casting long shadows over the village, where buffalo hide tents stood against the vastness of the prairie. The sky, speckled with stars, seemed to watch over the world below, like the ancient eyes of those who had come before, observing the fate of humankind. At the heart of the village, Tahu, a 16-winter-old youth, sat by the fire, his gaze locked onto the flickering flames. His heartbeat was fast, not out of fear, but from something deeper, an unsettling feeling that had haunted him for many nights. He dreamed of a giant eagle, its golden wings slicing through the heavens like blades of light. In his dreams, the bird circled above towering mountains, letting out a powerful cry that made the earth tremble. But what did it mean? The old shaman, Elder Raven, a man with a weathered face and eyes as sharp as a hawk's, watched Tahu in silence. He had seen the unrest in the boy's soul and felt that something was about to happen. "Your eyes are far away, young Tahu," murmured the shaman, his voice deep like distant thunder. The boy lifted his gaze, hesitating before speaking. How could he explain this invisible call that echoed within him? "I dreamed of the golden eagle again. She called to me, but I didn't know how to answer," Tahu admitted, his voice as quiet as the wind weaving through the tents. Elder Raven narrowed his eyes. Dreams were never just dreams, they were messages from the Great Spirit, omens sent from beyond the visible world. "The eagle does not call in vain," the shaman said, tossing sacred herbs into the fire. The smoke rose in spirals, twisting into shapes before dissolving into the night air. "She is a sign, and omens like these come only in times of great change." A shiver ran down Tahu's spine. He glanced around and noticed that something felt different about the village tonight. The laughter of the children was quieter, the fires burned with less vigor, and the air felt heavy, as if something unseen hovered over them all. In recent months, the harvests had withered, the rivers had grown shallow, and the great buffalo herds that once thundered across the plains had vanished. The hunters returned empty-handed, and whispers of fear spread among the elders. "The eagle appears when men have strayed from the right path," the shaman continued, now looking at Tahu with an intensity that sent another chill through him. "If she has chosen you to see her, then you have a role to play in this story." Tahu swallowed hard. Him? Chosen for something this great? The weight of the shaman's words fell upon his shoulders like an oncoming storm. Suddenly, a piercing cry cut through the sky. It was not human. An eagle. Tahu and the shaman lifted their heads. High above, against the star-speckled sky, a golden silhouette soared over the village, its wings stretched wide, embracing the night itself. It was her. The sacred eagle. The fire flickered, casting wavering shadows over the faces of the warriors and elders gathered around it. One by one, they lifted their eyes to the sky, their gazes fixed on the majestic golden eagle soaring above them. Its flight was calm yet carried an invisible force, as if it were measuring the souls of those below. Tahu felt his heart pound against his chest. The eagle was there for him. He knew it, felt it deep in his bones. But why? What did it want? Elder Raven tightened his grip on his carved wooden staff and murmured something in an ancient tongue. The eagle circled in the air, drawing a perfect loop over the village before turning toward the mountains, vanishing into the darkness. A deep silence settled over the tribe. This was a sign, Elder Raven spoke, his voice low but heavy with meaning. The Great Spirit speaks to us through the winds, the waters, and the animals. Tahu felt the weight of every gaze shifting toward him. They knew. They understood that the eagle had not appeared by chance. Tension had been growing in the village. The hunters were returning with fewer kills, the land seemed less generous, and the omens foretold troubled times ahead. The elders whispered among themselves, fearing that the gods had begun to withdraw their protection. "What must I do?" Tahu asked, his voice stronger than he expected. The shaman turned to him, his eyes gleaming with the reflection of the fire. "You must follow the eagle." The words sent a cold shiver through Tahu. Follow the eagle? He had never ventured into the mountains alone. That was sacred ground, a place whispered about in stories, home to ancient spirits and forces unknown. But even as fear twisted in his gut, something inside him knew he could not refuse this call. His father, a respected warrior, stepped forward and placed a strong hand on his shoulder. "This is your path, son. The Great Spirit does not choose the weak." A gust of wind blew through the village, making the flames dance and the dry leaves swirl across the ground. Tahu's fate was sealed. That night, he could not sleep. Lying on his leather mat, he stared at the ceiling of his tent, watching the firelight cast shifting shapes on the fabric. His heart was a battlefield, caught between fear and the thrill of the unknown. At the first light of dawn, Tahu fastened his wolfskin cloak around his shoulders, grabbed his short bow and a handful of arrows, and stepped out of the village. The first rays of sunlight painted the mountains in gold. And there, perched atop a jagged cliff, he saw her again. The golden eagle was waiting. She sat at the edge of the precipice, amber eyes locked onto his. She was larger than any eagle he had ever seen, her outstretched wings looked as though they could cover the entire sky. Tahu's heart pounded. The journey had begun. The cold mountain wind slashed across Tahu's face like invisible blades. His heart pounded like a war drum, but he did not turn back. The golden eagle was still there, majestic, her silhouette standing stark against the sky painted in shades of crimson and gold by the rising sun. He knew he had to follow her. With hesitant steps, he started up the steep path. The scent of damp earth mingled with the crispness of the cold stone beneath his feet. Every muscle in his body was taut, every sound around him echoing like whispers from ancient spirits. The eagle let out a piercing cry, its echo rolling across the mountains like distant thunder. Then, without warning, she spread her wings and took flight. Tahu ran, his blood roaring in his ears. He leaped over slippery rocks, dodged fallen logs and twisted branches. The terrain grew steeper with each step, demanding every ounce of strength from his body. His muscles burned, but he pushed forward. Every time he thought he had lost sight of the eagle, there she was, gliding effortlessly through the air, guiding him forward. But then, something changed. The sky, once bathed in the golden hues of morning, began to darken. Heavy clouds gathered on the horizon, thick and ominous, as if the heavens themselves were preparing to break apart. Tahu stopped, his breath coming in sharp gasps. His wide eyes scanned the darkening sky. A thunderclap rolled through the mountains, shaking the very ground beneath his feet. It was an omen. The eagle let out another cry, this time fiercer, more urgent. She circled over a hidden path between the jagged rocks, calling him forward. Tahu took a deep breath and pressed on. The path narrowed, hemmed in by towering cliffs that seemed to close in on him. A strange energy crackled in the air, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He felt watched. Then, all at once, it happened. A blinding flash split the sky, a lightning bolt struck just ahead of him, exploding against the rocks in a shower of sparks. The deafening crash sent Tahu sprawling backward. His heart nearly leapt from his chest. Coughing, he struggled to his feet, trying to catch his breath. And when he looked up, what he saw made his blood run cold. Beyond the swirling dust and embers stirred by the lightning strike, a figure emerged. At first, it was only a shadow. Then, a man cloaked in black wolf fur stepped forward, his eyes glowing like embers in the dark. He gripped a staff carved with ancient symbols, his very presence radiating raw, untamed power. A deep, primal chill ran through Tahu's spine. This was no ordinary man. This was the spirit of the storm. The eagle perched on a high rock, spreading her wings in all her fierce glory. She looked like a warrior bracing for battle. The fiery-eyed man studied Tahu for a moment before a faint, knowing smile crossed his lips. "You have come." Thunder roared across the heavens. And in that instant, Tahu knew his life would never be the same again. The wind howled through the mountains, whipping Tahu's hair and sending dry leaves swirling around him in spirals. The golden eagle remained steadfast on the highest rock, its talons digging into the stone as if daring the storm itself. Before him, the man with flaming eyes watched him with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through his soul. He was not merely an old shaman, nor a warrior of the tribe. He was something more, something ancient. The spirit of the storm. Tahu felt the weight of the moment. His heart pounded like a war drum, his mind flooded with questions. Who was this being? What did he want from him? The spirit raised his staff, and a thunderous roar echoed through the valley, vibrating deep within Tahu's bones. Then, he spoke. His voice did not come just from his lips, it came from the very air around them. It was as if the wind itself carried his words, as if the mountains whispered secrets long forgotten. "You have come, because the eagle has chosen you." A shiver ran down Tahu's spine. The golden eagle had chosen him. The spirit stepped forward, his feet not touching the ground, as though he were part of the very storm swirling above them. "Long ago, your people forgot the old ways. They lost their respect for the wind, the water, the fire, and the earth. The balance was broken. But now, the eagle has found a pure heart, someone who can still hear the call of the spirits." Tahu tried to speak, but his throat was dry. His whole body trembled. The eagle let out a fierce cry, its call echoing through the cliffs. The spirit of the storm lifted his staff and pointed at Tahu. "Prove your worth, young warrior. Show us that strength still lives within your people's hearts." Suddenly, the sky erupted into a furious tempest. Lightning streaked across the horizon, and rain poured down in torrents. But strangely, not a single drop touched Tahu or the spirit. The wind whispered in Tahu's ears, carrying ancient words, like echoes of voices long forgotten. He knew what he had to do. He took a deep breath and looked at the eagle. Its golden eyes burned with power. Then, without hesitation, Tahu closed his eyes and spread his arms, allowing the force of the storm to surge through his veins. The spirit smiled slightly, and Tahu felt his body lifted by an overwhelming energy. The wind wrapped around him, swirling in a wild, untamed dance of nature. His skin tingled, every nerve alight with the storm's raw power. He was part of it now. Then, he heard the eagle's voice, not with his ears, but with his soul. "Open your eyes, young warrior. See beyond what men can see." And when Tahu finally opened his eyes, he saw. He saw the rivers speak, the winds dance, the animals glowing with the energy of the living earth. He saw spirits walking among men, unseen by those who had forgotten how to look. He had awakened. The spirit of the storm watched him with approval. The eagle spread its wings wide and, with a final piercing cry, launched itself into the sky. Tahu collapsed to his knees, breathless. He was no longer just a boy of the tribe. He was now part of something far greater. And his true challenge had only just begun. The wind still howled through the mountains, but something had changed. Tahu was no longer the same. He could feel every shift in the air, every beat of the golden eagle's wings above his head. His body trembled, but not with fear, with power. The storm felt alive, swirling around him like a conscious force, waiting for his decision. The spirit of the storm stood in silence, his eyes glowing like twin bolts of lightning trapped within. Then, he spoke. "Power has been given to you, young warrior. But power without purpose is like a river without a bed, it destroys everything in its path." Tahu felt the weight of the words. Inside him, energy surged like a thunderbolt ready to strike. But what was his purpose? The spirit lifted his hand, and the storm obeyed, retreating like a tamed wolf. The sky cleared just enough to reveal something that made Tahu's heart stop. His village. Down below, beyond the valleys, his people went about their lives as if nothing had changed. But now, Tahu saw what had always been invisible: the land was sick. The rivers were tainted by neglect. The trees were being cut down without reverence. The balance was unraveling, and no one seemed to notice. The spirit of the storm had brought him here for a reason. The sky does not forget, Tahu. The eagle does not choose without reason. You now see what your people refuse to acknowledge. Tahu swallowed hard. The truth burned inside him. He had always known it, but he had never wanted to accept it. His village had strayed from the old ways. The golden eagle landed on his shoulder, its talons strong yet careful. Its eyes gleamed with a silent message. Tahu had a choice. He could return to his village and ignore what he had seen, live as he always had. He could accept that change was impossible. Or he could fight. "What will you do, young warrior?" the spirit asked, his voice heavy with expectation. Tahu closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Deep inside, the thunder roared. When he opened them again, his decision had already been made. "I will make them remember." The spirit of the storm smiled, then vanished, dissolving into the wind as if he had never existed. But Tahu knew he would always be there. The eagle spread its wings and, with a mighty leap, soared into the sky, calling for Tahu to follow. Without hesitation, he ran back toward the village. The true challenge was only beginning. The wind howled through the valley as Tahu ran along the trail back to the village. His heart pounded in rhythm with the powerful wing beats of the golden eagle soaring above him, a silent sentinel of the destiny now weighing on his shoulders. When he finally crossed the village boundary, the first gazes turned toward him. He was different. The boy who had climbed the mountain full of doubts now returned with firm steps, his eyes carrying a fire that no one could ignore. The children stopped playing to watch him. The women weaving baskets and fabrics exchanged silent glances. The warriors sharpening their spears for the hunt furrowed their brows. But it was his father, Kanu, one of the village's great elders, who stepped forward first. His expression held both pride and concern. "Tahu," his voice rumbled like distant thunder, deep and commanding. "You have returned. And I see the eagle is still with you." Tahu planted his feet firmly on the earth and lifted his head. "Father. I have seen what is happening to our land. The forest, the rivers, the winds, they are all suffering. The eagle showed me. The spirit of the storm revealed the truth to me." A murmur rippled through the village. Some elders frowned. Others exchanged wary glances. Kanu pressed his lips together. "Be careful with your words, Tahu. Our traditions are ancient. Our relationship with the land has always been one of respect." Tahu felt anger rising within him. "Not anymore. Not as it should be. You've stopped listening to the voice of the forest. You take more than you need. The rivers are poisoned by neglect. The trees are cut down without gratitude. The hunt is no longer sacred, it has become a contest for status." The silence grew heavy. The village fire flickered under the shifting wind. Then, one of the elder hunters, Hiran, stepped forward. His face was lined with time, his expression severe. "And you think that spending one night on the mountain makes you wiser than us? We have been the guardians of this land for generations, boy. Tahu clenched his fists. It's not about knowing more, it's about remembering. You've forgotten what it means to live in balance. The spirit of the storm chose me to open your eyes. Huran laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was a bitter, mocking one. Spirit of the storm, golden eagle, he looked around, seeking support from the other villagers. Why does this boy think he's special? Does he believe he can teach us how to care for the land that has given us life? Some villagers nodded, uncertain. Others remained silent, unsure of what to believe. Then, the golden eagle landed on the ground beside Tahu. And all eyes widened in shock. The bird showed no fear of humans, did not flap its wings to keep them away. It simply stood there, watching each of them with its piercing golden gaze, as if it were judging them. The elders exchanged uncertain looks. It's a sign, one of the elder women whispered. Huran shifted uncomfortably. Kanu studied his son for a long moment. Then, he turned to the other elders. We should listen to what he has to say. Huran wanted to protest, but the other elders slowly nodded. The people gathered around Tahu, waiting. He took a deep breath. If we do not change now, if we do not restore balance, the forest will not show us mercy. The wind carried his words through the village. The first seeds of change had been planted. But Tahu knew, the real battle was only just beginning. Night fell over the village like a silent shroud, but the spirit of the storm still lingered. Tahu felt the weight of every gaze upon him, some curious, others doubtful, and a few filled with silent fury. He knew that words alone would not be enough. The golden eagle was still there, perched atop the great wooden totem at the center of the village. Never before had a wild animal remained so close to humans without fear. For many, it was a sign. For others, a challenge to tradition. Kanu stood before the gathered people, his posture carrying the authority of a leader, yet his eyes betraying the unease of a father. Tahu brings a message. But the words of a young man do not change the ways of an entire tribe. If he speaks the truth, then let him prove to the spirit of the forest that he is worthy. Murmurs rippled through the villagers. Prove himself worthy. What did that mean? Huran, the eldest hunter, stepped forward with a cynical smile. If Tahu truly believes the forest has chosen him, then let him accept the warrior's challenge. Tahu held his head high, though he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What is the challenge? Huran crossed his arms, his voice laced with scorn. You claim the forest speaks to you, that the eagle is your guide. Then let it lead you to the peak of the Shadow Mountains, where the river is born. There, you must retrieve the spirit stone. If you return before dawn, we will accept your words. The village fell into silence. Everyone knew the Shadow Mountains. It was a sacred place, and a dangerous one. The forest was dense, filled with treacherous ravines and wild beasts. No warrior would dare attempt the journey at night, but that was the test. Kanu pressed his lips together, his eyes heavy as they rested on his son. If this is your choice, go. But remember, there is no shame in refusing. Tahu looked at the golden eagle. It had not abandoned him yet. And if the forest had truly chosen him, then he had to trust it. He took a deep breath. I accept. A shiver passed through the village. Tahu stepped into the darkness, the eagle soaring silently above him. The dense forest closed in around Tahu as he moved forward in the darkness. The sound of branches snapping beneath his feet blended with the whispering wind weaving through the trees, as if the forest itself was watching his journey. Above him, the golden eagle cut through the night sky, its eyes glowing like embers, guiding him into the unknown. Every step was a challenge. Treacherous roots tried to trap him, shadows danced around him, and the eyes of nocturnal predators glowed in the dark. But Tahu did not hesitate. Deep inside, he knew this was his path. Hours passed until the trees began to thin, revealing the base of the Shadow Mountains. The air was cold, and the high moon cast silver light upon the rocky path leading to the summit. The climb would be grueling, but Tahu was not alone. The eagle let out a sharp cry and dove ahead, vanishing into the mist. Tahu clenched his fists and pressed on. The final trial. The ascent was brutal. The cold stone cut into his hands, and the fierce wind threatened to throw him off balance. His body ached, his muscles trembled, but he did not stop. Then, halfway up the mountain, the storm arrived. Lightning slashed across the sky, and the mountain rumbled as if it were alive. Rain fell like sharp needles, turning the rocks slick and treacherous. Fear crawled into Tahu's mind. What if he couldn't do it? What if he fell? But then, the eagle returned. It hovered above him, its flight calm and steady in the heart of the raging storm. It wasn't fighting the wind, it was using it. Tahu understood. Instead of battling the storm, he had to move with it. With new eyes, he found secure footholds in the rock, adapting to the flow of the wind and rain. The forest was teaching him its final lesson: accept, rather than resist. At last, he reached the summit. There, at the heart of the mountain, lay a crystal-clear lake bathed in moonlight. In the center, atop a small stone, the spirit stone gleamed like liquid fire. Tahu knelt before it, his breath heavy but his mind weightless. He touched it, and felt the forest within him. The wind whispered his name. The trees vibrated in greeting. The mountain welcomed him. The eagle landed beside him. Now, he understood everything. He was no longer just a boy. He was chosen. The return of the forest's son. The journey back was different. The forest seemed to embrace him, clearing his path. When he emerged into the village clearing at dawn, the spirit stone glowing in his hand, the entire tribe was there. Their eyes were wide, their hearts locked in silence. Huran, the most skeptical hunter, took a step back, unable to hide his shock. Chief Kanu looked at his son, not as a boy, but as a man forged by the forest itself. Then, the golden eagle descended from the skies, landing on the central totem of the village. It was not a spirit. It was a sign. Tahu raised the spirit stone, and in that moment, no one doubted him anymore. The forest had spoken. He was now the bridge between man and nature. The eagle let out one last cry to the sky, and Tahu knew, his true journey was only beginning. The legend of Tahu and the golden eagle would be told for generations, a boy once rejected by his tribe, who faced the darkness and discovered his true purpose. But more than anything, this was a story about balance. The forest and mankind. Strength and wisdom. Fear and courage. And whenever the moon shone over the shadow mountains, the elders would say that if you listened closely, you could hear the sound of wings slicing through the sky. Because Tahu and the golden eagle never stopped protecting the forest. If you followed the story this far, give it a like, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to hear more stories like this.